Hello, everybody, and welcome to Level the Field Leadership. My name is Dr. Rachel Gallardo, and as always, I'm very thankful that you've decided to spend the next 30 minutes or so worth of heartbeats listening to what it is that we're going to be talking about today. If this is your first time, I just want to say welcome. No obligation. You don't have to do anything at all. Just thankful that you stumbled upon this, or maybe somebody referred you, and that you're taking the time to listen to what we're talking about today. But if you are returning, continue to share, continue to comment. You never know whenever something that we say during these conversations might be helpful for others. So leadership really and truly is a journey. I don't believe we have to do this alone. So let's keep building that community as you guys are doing so very well. As many of you know, I do believe that it is important for us to constantly strengthen our leadership skills because everything that we do ultimately does have an impact, and everything we don't do also has an impact on our teams. And I do believe that workplace burnout is very real. So anything we can do to reduce fatigue and burnout in our leadership roles will ultimately have a positive impact on our team. So I don't want to spend too much on all of that because most of you already know that, but let me go ahead and tell you about our guest today. His name is Ian McCoog, and he was born and raised in the coastal region of Eastern Pennsylvania. He had a very humble upbringing with, it's given him a lot of very creative stories. And he has attended Bloomsburg University, where his interest in stories and people stemmed from studying history and philosophy. We're going to try to keep it on the leadership route because I'm sure there's plenty of other things we can discuss, but all of that kind of combines together in that he earned a master's degree and he did teach at the K through 12 level for 13 years before returning to graduate school to earn a doctorate in educational leadership from Wilkes University. But in his role as assistant professor, Ian assists medical students in their pursuit of medical humanities, narrative medicine, and leadership studies. He is a certified narrative 4 facilitator and an alumnus of the University of Toronto Narrative-based medicine program. Ian, welcome to the show. I'm very happy to dive into this with you today.
Thank you, Rachel. That was sorry for the mouthful of an introduction I had to provide there.
Well, you're just getting started, right? As long as you're still walking, you still got a purpose, right? So there's still more to add to
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely.
Well, as many of our listeners know, I do like to kind of base our topic kind of around a theme for a particular scripture. And it just seemed kind of fitting to go with Deuteronomy 32:7. Remember the days of old, consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you, your elders, and they will tell you. I really do believe that there is power in understanding the history of things. So that way we can kind of understand why we arrived at where we're at right now. So, Ian, I mean, first and foremost, what inspired you to write the book, and why is it important for you to help other people understand just kind of this progressive history of leadership as a whole?
Well, the book really started as me trying to find my place. So as you had mentioned, Rachel, I teach at a medical school. I was certainly not going to teach medicine because I don't have a medical background. So I was trying to find my place of where I was going to fit at the college that I work at. And I really looked at my expertise and thought, how can I apply that to helping future physicians lead teams? So that was kind of where it all started. A colleague and I sat down and decided that we wanted to do an elective for our fourth year students on leadership that would introduce them to leadership theories that they could put into practice once they move into residency and once they become attending physicians. So what we did was we sat down and kind of thought about which theories would be most useful to our students. We thought about some reflective writing assignments where they could apply the leadership theories to something that they have done so far in their professional or personal lives. And it became a really valuable exercise for us, and it's become a very popular elective for our medical students. So the book kind of came from taking that to the next step. It was hard for my colleague and I to think of just five leadership theories that we wanted to present because there are so many good ones that could really help people in different aspects of their careers or their personal lives. So I just kind of kept going and went from 5 to 18. And then I used some of that creative writing interest that I had to write a book that covers 18 leadership theories and has 18 short stories that pair with those leadership theories just to make them more engaging. I feel like a leadership book, a theory of leadership book can be very dry, which
Mhm.
is great if that's what you're looking for. You're looking for just straight theories, but
Mhm.
people tend to remember stories. It makes a connection to them personally, and that was what I had hoped for with the book. In the same way that we do it with the assignments at our course, the students reflect upon a time they were in charge of a club, or they had some volunteer experience, and how leadership theories could have helped them in that scenario. So that's my hope with the book. I hope that somebody picks it up, learns a little bit about leadership, but also enjoys those stories so that they can apply them to their own lives.
Did you have any pushback from the students whenever they found out that this was going to be added to their curriculum? Because at least in my experience, especially with graduate students, sometimes they're like, "Look, I just want to know what it is that I need to know because of this particular degree that I'm trying to pursue." Did you have that kind of pushback with medical students, wondering why do I need to know about leadership? All I need to know is medicine.
Well, I guess the lucky thing for us was it's an elective, so they
Okay.
don't have to all take it. It's only students that are interested. But I have had interesting responses from students after they take the course. Think they go into it thinking, if I want to be a hospital administrator one day, I should have some training in leadership.
Mm,
If I want to get an MBA to go along with my MD so that, I can be the head of something someday, I should have some leadership training. But what they realize when they take the course is that leadership is applicable so much to their daily lives, not just now, but what they've done in the past and what they'll be doing as interns and as, first and second year residents when they're just first starting out in their careers.
sure. Yeah. Because even if you're still kind of going through that process of being a doctor, you still have people that are looking to you, whether it be nurses or aides or whoever, to kind of guide the process and guide the decision making. So you still need that as you're working towards your degree. So when you were doing the research for this book and looking at all of these different leadership theories, which leadership theory surprised you the most?
Sure. I've gotten a really good answer to this question because it really did open my eyes. And it took me a little bit to put the pieces together for this one. But I was reading a book by Daniel Goleman, Richard Boyatzis, and Annie McKee called Primal Leadership. And Daniel Goleman's name, of course, jumped out as he's the father of emotional intelligence. But as I read this book, I was realizing that it was a leadership theory that was tied to the principles that Goleman had outlined in emotional intelligence. However, it's not called primal leadership. The book is just called primal leadership. So the one that really jumped out to me was resonant leadership. I've been applying that a lot when I speak to people, when I work with colleagues, when I do professional development. And as a leader, what you say and what you do resonates throughout the organization. So it resonates the loudest and the most directly with the people that you work with most often. So in my case, at a medical school, we have the dean, we have the provost, we have, the everybody that reports to them. So when a decision is made, that resonates loudest with those people that are closest. But it doesn't stop there. It works its way down through the organization, and everybody is affected by and hears that decision as it works its way down through the organization. So, the third shift maintenance man is going to be affected by the decision that you make as the leader of the organization. Maybe not as loudly and maybe not as directly, but that's an important thing, I think, for leaders to keep in mind, especially because what you put out can either resonate positively or negatively. Goldman calls the negative ones dissonant leadership.
Mhm.
So we have resonance and we have dissonance. You're in a position as a leader where you're deciding what goes out through your organization. So it's easy to say we always want it to be positive, but people's definitions of positive are going to be different based upon the scenario. But that's something that's important to keep in mind. So maybe as the leader, I make the decision, and the people that report directly to me are the ones who that affects the loudest. But I also have to keep in mind that that's going to affect everybody. So everybody, as you go down the organizational chart, or throughout the culture of your organization, your business, your school, whatever it happens to be, is affected by the resonance of that decision by the leader.
So it's like the butterfly effect,
Yeah.
a small decision that somebody may not even think twice about can have this huge magnified impact long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
So having said all of that, do you think that leaders are born or made? And I know that this is a very loaded question. We could probably spend an entire episode just talking about this. I mean, dissertations have been written about it. It's just insane. But just based on your research and what you've seen, I mean, what are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, so I took a historical approach to leadership theory in this book. Initially, I had it organized by like what I thought were the best stories. Like I wanted to hook people from the start and then they would want to read the rest. And then the first thing my editor said was, don't do that. Just put these chronologically. It'll make so much more sense. So I think this notion of leaders being born or leaders being made can really follow that historical flow from, the beginning of leadership theory up until modern day. The early theorists said that leadership was something that you were born with. It wasn't something that could be enhanced or can be made, which has been disproved by behaviorists and now into even more, emotionally laden, psychology behind leadership. First leadership theory is great man theory in the 1880s, where Thomas Carlyle said that history is nothing but the story of great men,
Mm,
which sounds it hits your ear as bad as it sounds coming out of your mouth.
sure.
Uh, but I mean, we start with these notions of that there are specific traits that make good leaders, and those things are fixed. And then we move into more behaviorism that says you are born with a set of traits. Your personality is your personality. However, you can make adjustments in your interactions with people and your comfort in working with people in order to take other people's views into account. Me personally, I kind of think I'm the converse. I'm more of a people pleaser. So I feel like I would be the kind of leader that would not have those traits that we value specifically in leaders. But I've learned to kind of make those adjustments, to make a decision when I have to make a decision, to take a stand when I have to take a stand. So to answer your question in a very roundabout way, I think the first theorists thought that leaders were born and were not made. And that's been debunked for about 100, 150 years of leadership theory. In
Mhm.
that, yes, there are aspects of who we are that are fixed, but we can always make adjustments. We can always learn more. We can always care more. We can always do better to make those adjustments to make us a better leader.
Mhm. Yeah, I would have to agree with that assessment. I have people that ask me that question as well. And I think that you're born how you're born. Your DNA is your DNA. But I think it's important that you understand who you are. So you have that self-assurance. And then you also dabble in a little bit of self-efficacy and realize that my leadership style may not necessarily be like somebody else's leadership style, but as long as we're both being effective in whatever niche of the world that we're leading, I think that's more important than anything. I work with people that are extroverts that are amazing leaders. I am not an extrovert. I consider myself to be more of an introvert, but that doesn't mean that I'm less effective. It's just different. And I think it takes time for people to realize who they are, but then also for your team to realize what type of leader you're going to be. And your team will shape and mold you in your leadership style too. There's certain people on my team that I have certain conversations with in a certain style, but one-on-one, but then other people it's a little bit different. But it's more about the connection that you make with each person individually, not necessarily just how you come kind of like blast your leadership style as a whole to everybody.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, on that note, I want to get into contingency theory just a little bit. Um, do you think that people have the ability to adapt to different leadership styles depending upon the situation that the organization is currently going through? I mean, what has been some of your research on contingency theories?
So the main contingency theory that I highlight in the book is that's actually contingency theory, introduced by Fred Fiedler in the 1970s. And I found a great example of a short story to kind of pair with the contingency theory.
Okay.
And it's about a long distance runner. Her name is Alexi Pappas. She's a real person. Excuse me. I just want to take a drink quick. Okay, restarting. Her name is Alexi Pappas. She is a real person. And she tells the story of when she was at the Rio Olympics. She was running for Greece. She is American, but through her family line, she can run for Greece. And she's running 10,000 meters. And prior to the race, her coach took her aside and said, "There was no way you're going to win. So don't try to win," which is counterintuitive to every athletes. We say, try your best, work your hardest, anything is possible. But basically, what her coach was saying was that you're not going to win this race. So don't run this race. Run your race in the best way that you can.
Mm,
And it's exactly what happened. She did not win. She finished in 16th place at the Rio Olympics. However, she broke the Greek national record in the 10,000 meters for women.
wow.
So I think that's a great example of those contingency theories. You have to be realistic. You have to know what your goals are. You have to know the situation that you're in. And your response as a leader or as a runner is not to do the absolute best thing, but to do the best thing based on the situation where you find yourself. And another thing I like about Alexi's story, her book is called Bravey, not bravery, Bravey. It's part of her mantra. Is that when you go through the book, she tells the story of the Rio Olympics and how she broke the record and the interaction she had with the coach. But she says that what's been beautiful about this is that it's given her a platform to talk about mental health in athletes. So perhaps she wouldn't have had that platform had she not had the experience. She could have went out there and said, "I'm going to run as hard as I can to try to run down this girl who's going to end up winning this race anyway, get really tired, not break a national record and just, be this an Olympian." But she's been able to kind of translate that self-awareness of situation, self-awareness of her abilities and situational awareness of the situation, to not only do something fantastic on the track, but to be able to translate that into something fantastic in her life.
Wow. Wow. I really love that. And I love there was a comment that you just said it was to be more than just an Olympian. I think sometimes we sell ourselves too short. I mean, the fact that she can say, yes, I was able to go to the Olympics and represent my country. I mean, there's such a small percentage of people walking around on planet Earth that can say that. And during those 2 weeks, whether it be the summer or the winter, I mean, all eyes are kind of focused on what those athletes are doing and how's my country performing? And, you see a lot of like nationalism with every country whenever those are going on. So, I think sometimes we sell ourselves short. We're like, well, I just went to the Rio Olympics. So I was like, well, no, no, wait a minute. Do you not understand? Like literally you've done something that such a small percentage of people have been able to accomplish despite so many people trying. And then the rest of us, as a runner, believe me, nobody's Nike's not calling me for any sort of endorsement. So I think we sell ourselves short a little more often than we should. So, since you like this idea of history, and I'm a historian, I'm not a historian. I enjoy history. I can't remember the dates and things like that, but I love the story of history. But can you tell us about maybe some historical leaders that, at least in your opinion, really best represent transformational leadership? I guess first we should define what transformational leadership is for those that don't know. But then, is there a historical person that you want to highlight?
Sure. So transformational leadership to me is when you're moving an entire organization forward, like from a thought process kind of level. I, so the one that goes with transformational leadership oftentimes, and in my book, is transactional leadership. And really, I think the easiest way to explain it in a business sense is in a transactional environment, you're exchanging hours for dollars. I go to work every day. I clock in at 8, I clock out at 4, and then the rest of my time is my own. I do whatever I want with it, but I have an agreed upon wage for an agreed upon amount of hours. One of the examples I use in the book for transactional is actually my mentor was a high school principal in Maine before he became a college professor and before he became a dean of the College of Education, where I went, where I met him. And he would always tell me these stories about when he was in Maine. The Dexter Shoe Factory was in his town. So his goal was always to train students to be able to go and work in that factory and scrape out a good middle class existence, for their lives, prepare them for that. There were a lot of students who went above and beyond and went to college and did all of that stuff. But for the most part, the base that he had worked for was that transactional relationship of, I'm preparing students for the workplace. Um, and then when I worked with him when he was dean at the college, I saw a lot of the transformational leadership. I saw this notion of that there are competing interests, and you have to balance out those competing interests, and you have to do what's going to be best for the organization. He had 3 or 4 degree granting, programs that um, reported to him, and he was the one who had to divvy out how the budget was going to work. So everybody needed more people, everybody needed more money, everybody needed more resources. But
Yep.
ultimately, he had to take that transformational approach to kind of say, this is what it is. Um, from a historical aspect, my brain immediately went presidents because I have an undergrad in history, so I promise not to get too political. But I think of you know like George Washington. It's probably a popular answer. This notion of, and it's not just historical leaders; it's us in our daily lives. I've always heard the phrase, luck is where preparation and opportunity meet. So I think that kind of speaks to this question. George Washington was a great military leader trained by the British, and when the opportunity arose to be the leader of the new nation and to earn our independence, he rose to that occasion. Dwight Eisenhower, another one, great military mind, also transitioned into being a great president as a leader because that opportunity had presented itself and he had the preparation and those two things met. But honestly, I think it applies to all of our lives. From our conversation before, Rachel, you had worked your way up as an educator, and now when the leadership opportunity came for you to work in the community college setting, like you jumped at it because you were ready. You had the expertise, you had the experience, you're ready to go. And same with my situation. The opportunity to come work at medical school presented itself.
Mhm.
If I didn't have the expertise, if I didn't have the experience, if I didn't have the preparation that I had, I probably would just throw my hands up in the air and said, I have no idea what I'm doing here. Why did you hire me?
Right.
But I figured out where I fit and where I belong. So I think that's a big part of it, how we are prepared and when that preparation meets an opportunity. And I know I just gave you 2 very generic presidential answers, but that's where my brain went. I don't think we have um, good leaders who have not been prepared their entire lives for the opportunity to lead.
hmm hmm Well, and I think too, sometimes and I've talked about imposter syndrome on previous episodes, so I won't kind of go down that road. But I think that we sometimes get locked in of, well, I don't necessarily have experience in this area, and we forget that some of our skills are transferable into other places. There might be some industry lingo, there might be some just generic business cyclical things that we're not mindful of, that we're not aware of. But if you've got the background and the experience in leadership or whatever skill set that you possibly have, you can always transfer that over. I know people that used to be a nurse and then she decided she wanted to run a flower shop. Um, two totally different jobs, but the bedside manner that she was able to have with her nurses or with her patients, I should say, she's able to provide that in a customer service component whenever she's dealing with customers. So it really and truly is all connected. We just have to figure out our niche and figure out a couple of things logistically from the business side of it. But those key skills are there and they really are transferable. And sometimes we hold ourselves back because we think, well, I've never even, kept a plant alive. I can't run a flower shop. Well, that's not really relevant, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The gentleman who wrote the foreword for my book, he and I had lunch just to kind of catch up. And out of the blue, he told me he was moving, and I was like, okay. But he was going to work remotely at his position at the university. And he said, I have X amount more years before I could retire. And then, you know what? I think I'm going to attend bar because he was moving to a place that was kind of touristy.
Yeah.
And I kind of stopped and I thought, that would be the perfect job for him. Like
Yeah.
he's earned his pension, he's done his time, he's very
Right.
good with people. So yeah, when you don't have to worry about making money anymore because you've worked your 40 years and you're retired and you have pension, what would be a good job for him? Something where he just shoots the breeze with people at the bar. Like that would be a great
Right.
job for him.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I already know my third career. I want to open a coffee shop. So it's totally different from everything else. I hope to have a coffee shop and anyways, that's not the whole point of this. But you
Oh, but
mentioned
that is though. That's dangerous because I've just been thinking recently, like, when I don't want to do this anymore, I could totally buy like a storefront and like maybe I could talk the coffee shop from down the road, come in and have a bookstore. So you and I are thinking the same thing, Rachel.
Oh, see, there you go. There you go. No, and you mentioned the historical. I mean, I tend to go to presidents too when I think of leadership as well. For those that are listening, there's a book that I read not too long ago, and I can't remember the author, but it was basically about Mary Todd Lincoln. Um, so Abraham Lincoln's wife, and it was interesting the different dynamics that were going on and how he was having to lead the nation through that season of our history, while also his wife was having different things go on too. So if you're looking for another historical person to kind of look into, I would recommend that too. Um, but that kind of leads me into this other aspect of it in that how can historical leadership theories really influence today's push for authentic leadership? Because I see that a lot, like in social media and speaking engagements and what people are talking about. It's all about being authentic. It's all about being transparent. And I just wanted to kind of get your take on that. Like what's kind of led us to this point and what do you think is next when it comes to leadership?
Following the chronological trend, as I wrote Leadership Bites, it starts with those trait theories that we already talked about a little bit, and how they weren't the best of ideas, but it was a place to start, and then kind of moved into behaviorism from a psychological aspect. So we went from there are traits of leaders that are already determined to their behaviors of leaders that may be quasi-determined by your personality, but that you have influence over. And now into this realm of the more, I would say emotional laden, but emotional laden, authentic leadership. So learning to be yourself, learning to your followers or people that report to you understand that you're a person, you're not just, the leader of the organization. And it's kind of gone in a lot of interesting routes as far as recent leadership theories. The most contemporary one I have in the book was actually just published in 2024, and it talks about vulnerable leadership,
Mm,
um, about striking that balance of showing your employees that you're a person while also not, putting yourself on the therapy couch and making it weird. Uh,
right.
that's an interesting concept that 150 years ago, when we were saying that leadership is a set of traits and you have them or you don't, isn't something that would be thought about.
Sure.
So I think authentic leadership kind of falls into that category of, you know, you trust the people that you work with. They are there for a reason. Um, Another good one, recently was quiet leadership. This notion of quiet leadership where the leader kind of goes off by themselves, lets team make decisions, and then only imparts when it's time to take things to the next step. It's a very hands-off approach. Um, but if you have the right team and you have put people in the right place, do they really need you looking over their shoulder? Probably not. They just need a little
Mhm.
bit of guidance here and there. So I think that's what authentic leadership is all about. Not micromanaging, trusting the people that you have to do the best in the position that they're in, while also being aware that you may have to make adjustments if something doesn't work out. I mean, we have all had a team where there is a squeaky wheel or somebody that just doesn't seem to be, um, doing what they need to do. Um, but that's also being authentic, not ignoring the issue, addressing it for the good of the team.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
And sorry
as
about your sneeze.
oh, that's okay. That's what the mute button is for. As somebody that has had the fortunate, unfortunate experience of working for a micromanager, in my early years of employment, I can say that while it was terrible, that was probably the biggest learning experience that I had ever had. Um, it I think oftentimes we look at these leaders like, oh, I just really want to aspire to be that person and to lead like that person does. And what this leader doesn't understand, at least for me, and I won't say her name because I don't want to put anybody on blast, but I actually learned more from her than I did from the leaders that I'm inspired by, because at least she taught me the things that I don't want to do. I remember how it made me feel, and I don't want to inflict that on anybody else around me. So we can learn a lot from really great leaders. We can learn a lot from really terrible leaders too.
Yeah, I put better.
Well, we're kind of at the point now where I like to call it the shameless plug. So it's basically a couple of minutes for you to be able to talk about anything you want as long as it's legal. Um, so if you've got any website that people can find, if you want to share your book information, anything like that, feel free to do so.
Sure. Yeah, I realize that we've been talking about my book for a large portion of this, and I just mentioned the title for the first time about a minute ago. So my book is Leadership Bites, an approachable handbook for emerging leaders. As I said before, it is a collection of leadership theories presented chronologically with short stories that are, attention-getting and hopefully memorable for folks. Um, my website, it is just my name, so it's easy. It's ianmccoog.com. I have all kinds of links to podcast interviews like this, events, articles, places you could buy the book. Book can be purchased at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, your local bookstore, all of that stuff. Um, my publisher is Rootstock Publishing. They're from Vermont, so you can go directly to the Rootstock website as well. And also, I'm doing an event in Vermont. We're doing Bookstock in Woodstock, Vermont, coming up in May. So that should be really cool. But I think that's all I have to plug right now.
Nice, nice. Well, I really appreciate your time. I really enjoyed our conversation. I'm gonna have to, because I love anything that combines like that very, like you said before, kind of the dry information, but then gives a story. I think that's how we can really learn the best. And if you're listening to this, I'll include all of that information that Ian just talked about in the show notes. So you can go to his website, you can find out all information. I would really encourage you to connect with him as well. If you really like kind of this combination of the science and the history of the progression of leadership, or if you just like a really good story, it's nice to kind of have some of those things that come up in our social media feeds instead of some of the usual items that tend to occur. But again, I just want to encourage everybody, if you're listening to, if you haven't done so already, to make sure that you do hit the subscribe button to be alerted when new content is posted. Share this episode with somebody that might benefit. Share it with somebody that loves history. Share it with somebody that loves a good story. I think it's just important for us to stay connected. You guys know that you can find me on all of the social media outlets as well. Tag us. That way Ann and I can walk along with that person to help develop their leadership too. And remember, you are made to be a leader right where you are, wherever you're leading. The things that we talked about today can help you develop the roots of your leadership so you can weather any storm. Ian, thank you so much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And everybody listening, take care of yourself, take care of your team. You can 1000% do this. And until next time.